Good morning, everybody. We're going to start off with the second panel. This panel is going to be, as you can tell, the biggest panel of the day. Jerry Lewis is heading it up from IBM. He is one of the strongest people in this arena of ESG, and we have a phenomenal panel this morning on net zero, and I am humbled by all my good friends who have come to join us today and share this with us. With that, Jerry, please kick it off and get started. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tim, for the kind words. I appreciate that. We do have quite an esteemed panel here. In fact, the introductions I have are going to take us about 6 or 7 minutes to get through. I had to rehearse them a couple of times just to be sure I could pronounce all the concepts here. So we're going to get started right away. We've got, I'm sorry? Oh, hey, Ravina, welcome. Good. We've got, I think, 9 people on this panel to talk about ESG. And we'll start with Matt Flanagan. Matt is the COO of Maze Environmental. And as Maze Environmental's Chief Operating Officer, Matt works collaboratively with his clients, business partners, and Maze professionals to ensure they provide high quality, reliable equipment leasing and field service solutions. Maze Environmental's innovative stabilizer solution increases oil and production, improves operational safety, and eliminates flaring and methane emissions within hours of entering service. Matt brings more than 25 years of extensive energy industry and subject matter expertise as a global executive selling and delivering large-scale business and technology transformation programs for multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations, as well as leading startup organizations with the design and implementation of cost-effective business models. Prior to joining Maze, Matt spent more than 10 years as a partner with a diversified management consulting firm serving the energy industry. He led the firm's technology practice across the US and Europe and was responsible for business development, client service delivery, practice management, and people development. Welcome, Matt. Next, we have Reed Morrison, partner with PwC, global energy advisory leader and net zero and ESG. And Reed is a principal in the PwC Houston office and leads the global energy advisory practice, along with advising clients on ESG, net zero, and energy transition. Welcome, Reed. Next, we have Tom Mcnulty, principal at Value Scope, and Tom leads the Value Scope Houston office and its energy practice. Value Scope is a boutique transaction and valuation advisory firm, and Tom brings more than 25 years experience working across the entire energy value chain, drawing on a rare combination of industry, Wall Street, consulting, and government experience to provide his clients with transaction, commercial analytics, litigation, and valuation opinion services. Tom is nationally recognized commodity and energy trading industry expert and has appeared on CNBC, Fox Business, and Bloomberg TV. Got a celebrity. As an advisor and in his corporate career, Tom has delivered more than $55 billion with a B in energy-related transaction, valuation, restructuring, and litigation projects, and he's also advised on or executed $14 billion in M&A and principal investment deals and executed or valued more than $15 billion notional in derivative instruments. His expert litigation work has included shareholder disputes, business valuation, M&A, derivatives, and hedging, and damages assessments. Welcome, Tom. Brian Baum, who's virtual here, if you're looking at him on the screen there, he is a sustainability manager at Apache, and he currently serves as the sustainability manager for the upstream oil and gas producer. And he has been with the company for 5 years and served in a variety of operational roles related to sustainability-focused activities, including efforts in the reduction of freshwater usage and reducing the company's Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions. Prior to joining Apache, Brian spent 17 years working for other upstream exploration and production companies, both directly and as a consultant. Next, welcome, Brian. Next, we have William Malden, VP Operations of U.S. Auto Logistics. William provides leadership and operations, restructuring, turnaround strategies, debt recapitalizations, P&L, budgeting, new business development, financial analysis, and business analysis. William is recognized by executive decision makers and thought leaders for comprehensive expertise in operational streamlining, team leadership, account management, process improvements, contract negotiations, and startup operations. Welcome, William. Next, we have David Reed, sitting at the far end of the table here, CTO, CMO, and founder of Red M, organization we all love. David is the CTO and Chief Marketing Officer of NOV Inc. He has technology, patents, and inventions, and has been a key part of developing modern drilling rigs throughout his 30-year career with NOV. He is also the founder of Houston's professional development organization benefiting sex trafficking survivors, Red M. He is the drilling technical director on the board of the Society of Petroleum Engineers and has been a global speaker on automation, digitization, technology, business, and development of modern leadership. Welcome, David. Jennifer Montalvo joins us from U.S. Well Services as VP of Supply Chain. She recently joined U.S. Wells as VP after more than 6 years at Apache, where she held leadership roles in drilling, completions, and supply chain. Welcome, Jennifer. We have Pravina Paladugu, Sustainability Lead for Shell Lubricants Supply Chain, on the phone, remote. You can see her up there. Hello, Pravina. She's joining us from Shell, where she's been leading sustainability efforts in the lubricants business for the last 5 years. Prior to this, Pravina held a number of health, safety, security, and environment, or HSSE, roles at Shell and Valero. Welcome, Pravina. And last but not least, everybody's favorite, Renee Helmer, founder and CEO of Helmer Operations, or Helmer Ops. Helmer is a 56-year-old family-owned oil and gas company. We started in 1965 by Hank Helmer as a directional drilling company, and we're a leader in GOM offshore drilling. Helmer grew as the industry found new and faster ways to drill wells. Helmer was a leader in engineering mud motors and added a sister company called Helmer Guidance. Devastation from the coronavirus pandemic greatly inspired the Helmer family to rebuild and rebrand the business. Helmer Directional Drilling closed, and Renee Helmer opened Helmer Ops. Helmer Ops is a minority-owned oil and gas services company that makes some of the latest technology in drilling tools, optimization software, and flare gas remediation solutions and equipment. Decreasing the carbon footprint and optimizing our energy capabilities is the focus of Helmer Ops services and products. The flare gas remediation solutions and equipment is quickly gaining the attention of the operators in the Permian Basin. We realize that each field of captured gas is unique, and we have a team of engineers ready to evaluate the operator's specific needs. These solutions of repurposing the potential flare gas into electricity optimizes energy use and lowers the company's operating cost. Now, that was quite a lot to offer all of you as a way of introduction, but I think it's good because we have a pretty broad set of capabilities and experience represented up here, from operations to advisory. You know, when you get into ESG and driving to net zero, there's a lot that goes into that in terms of interacting with the public, policy, government. I think it's important to have a experience across investor relations and community relationships and all that. And I think we've got a very nice representation of the complete operational, logistical, legal, marketing, and other types of skills we need here. And the last about Helmer was a good kickoff, because it talked a little bit more about, you know, sort of driving to net zero, reducing gas emissions and things of that nature. So what we've done is, because we have so many people on the panel and we don't want this to be chaotic, we've decided to ask each panel member a question, allow them to respond, and we'll go in order. And then each panelist after that would have the chance to react to the questions we've asked previously. And of course, we could take audience questions at that time. But out of appreciation for all of your attendance, we want to give all of you an opportunity to answer the question we've selected for you. So without further ado, we'll jump into some questions. And we'll start with Shell and Pravina, who's on the phone. Pravina, we were curious to know what Shell Lubricants, which is a very large business and potentially has a large impact on the environment, what it's doing to reduce emissions and drive to net zero.
Perfect. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the question. So as you stated, we're the largest lubricants business in the world, and we've been market leaders for the last 15 years. Within our supply chain business, we're responsible for planning the production and delivery of our lubricants to our customers and to our distributed partners worldwide. And we aim to deliver improved performance with lower emissions, fewer natural resources, and ultimately less waste. And because we're an end-to-end business, we have the opportunity to take the sourcing and design disciplines across our entire value chain. This includes the raw materials that we're bringing in, our packaging, our distribution, and ultimately the end of life, what happens when our customers use our product and what happens to it afterwards. So we've expanded our carbon emission reduction goals to include not only just our own operations, our scope 1 and scope 2, but also include our customers as well, because we know that we cannot do it without our customers, right? So specifically what we're doing within our supply chain really boils down to 3 big elements: avoid, reduce, and offset. And of course, avoid and reduce are really our primary our end goals, but offset is also there in the meantime until we can deploy large scalable solutions. Across our supply chain, as I mentioned, in our production facilities, we're looking to reduce the amount of emissions by optimizing our efficiency of our production processes and increasing our renewable energy sources. So over 50% of our blending facilities now source renewable energy from wind, which is excellent, start in the right direction. We've also installed some energy monitoring systems to look at what areas of our plant we need to be focusing more on. Around the avoid piece, we're reducing, reusing, recycling our packaging across our entire supply chain. So we're including more recycled content, so PCR, in all of our packaging formats, including our bottles, some of our totes. We're looking at increasing re-refined base oil. We're using this at our facilities, looking at biodegradable oils, and also shifting away from small pack size to bulk dispensing and offering that to our customers as well. Around the reduce piece, as I mentioned, at our facilities, we're doing a lot to look at the efficiency, optimize that at our sites, and also optimizing our distribution network. So reducing the amount of miles on the road, figuring out a way where we can deliver our products to our customers in a more efficient manner. So going to full truckloads, for example, versus just half a truckload as one of the options, as well as moving some of our warehouses closer to our customers. And ultimately, there's a big piece around offset as well. So we are offering nature-based carbon credits that will compensate our CO2 emissions from the entire life cycle of our products, as I mentioned, from the raw materials, the packaging, the distribution. But one really exciting thing is we have just joined a industry-led technical coalition called the NLCRC, the National Lubricants Recycling Coalition, and we have formed it with other competitors and packaging manufacturers to look at finding a solution to disposing of oily bottles, because they're currently not being able to be recycled through conventional means. So we're looking at finding a solution in the US to develop a program that's large scale marketable to figure out a solution with recycling these bottles. So a lot of work that we're doing right now to work with our customers as well as what we're doing inside of our own facilities and our operations.
Thank you, Ravina. There's a lot to unpack there. I'm sure we could spend the entire panel just talking about what you're doing. It's really great to see that there's so much focus. And as we hear from the other panelists, I think we'll hear a lot of complementary concepts, and things that occur to me are like how you're measuring that, how's reporting on that, what's the governance like around the progress that you're making, what's the tech that enables you to do some of the things you're working on. So I'm sure we'll get into a lot of that because many of the other panelists have a perspective on some of those things, but it's great to hear that Shell Lubricants is focused on that and also working with ecosystem participants to drive to solutions, because it's just like supply chain, it's a connected chain of actors that drive us to net zero. So thanks for that, and I'm sure we'll come back to you with some questions. Thank you. Okay, next we have Brian, who's also remote. Brian, we were curious to know how companies are balancing 2050 net zero commitments against short and intermediate term commitments to show progress toward long-term goals.
Sure. So on the upstream oil and gas side, our planning cycles tend to be a little bit shorter. We look at a 5-year planning cycle. Commodity price volatility really causes us to look at much shorter time frames. So what we try to do is, and I think you'll see this across most of our peers, is while they may have a 2050 net zero goal, most of them are setting somewhere in a 5-year to 10-year target range of how they're going to do an emission reduction target, whether it's a greenhouse gas intensity target or a methane intensity target. So most of the operational activities is kind of geared towards these short time cycle frames. like Apache, 2021, our big goal was the zero routine flaring. It's a World Bank initiative for 2030. We tried to get it done early. We actually finished it and accomplished that in September of this year. So 3 months ahead of schedule, we actually were able to get to zero routine flaring in the U.S. And now we're working on, 2022 goals, and what are we going to have in 2022 goals, and then a little bit longer term cycle, looking at something in the 2025, 2026 range, then maybe a 2030 range. So it's really, for us, just because of having actionable items and trying to get accomplishments in a timely fashion, that will be driving towards that net zero goal. We're looking at these much shorter time frames and trying to establish, a 25 to 50% GHG reduction goal in a 5 to 10 year range, knowing that it's going to take a lot more additional effort to get those incremental improvements once we get this low hanging fruit out of the way.
Yeah, Brian, I think that's a good approach, because as most of you know who've ever worked with agility, long range plans, waterfall and Gantt charts don't really work beyond the time you make the plan. So planning out to 2050 today, not knowing what tech and what problems we're going to have along the way and what solutions are available probably won't work. So it's great to hear that you've got short-term goals that drive toward that longer-term goal. And I'm sure as we make progress over the next 4 or 5 years, you'll be able to build out that longer-term plan. So thank you for that, Brian. Next, we have a question for Reed. Reed, what are the key technologies, data, and methodologies that would better enable firms to understand their carbon footprints and those of their suppliers?
So the unit measure that one refers to is the ton CO2 equivalent. If you talk to an environmental scientist, they'll tell you it's actually an estimate. And I say that to just kind of ground everyone. Here's a quick exercise. Everyone raise your hand. Seriously, raise your hand. So how many of you know that there's 3 scopes to the GHG protocol? Keep your hand up. Okay. How many of you know there's 15 categories? Okay. How many of you know the GHG protocol is based on an ISO standard? Okay. This is the important part about this is it's a unit of measure that's based on estimates. And within that ISO standard, it's really good scientific guidance that says if you have a challenge with the data, then use best available emissions data. And it gives you 4 ways to calculate. The least reliable is called EEIO, Environmental Extended Input Output. It's a SWAC. Second is secondary data from industry or government agencies that have essentially come up with an average. EPA has a lot of emission factor calculations. Third is supplier verified data for the strict measurement. Keyword I used there was verified. In the ISO standard, it says if you want to disclose that data publicly, it has to be verified by an ISO accredited verifier. This is the gotcha to everyone who's making net zero commitments is the data is either incomplete or it doesn't exist. And when you get into that scope 3, category 1, purchase goods and materials, and category 11, customers' use of your goods and services. This is the daisy chain. And the data models don't exist right now. In terms of the technology that's coming, every one of the major software companies has a really robust platform. It has all the right kinds of optimization things. It just has an API to a data model that is largely paper. And the cool thing about this is we're going to start filling that database up. It's going to be incumbent on the supply chain and your suppliers to set the standard for them to get to the point where they can give you a verified calculation. And the nomenclature is called EPD, Environmental and Product Declaration, similar to MSDS. And the reason why this is the point I'm making to people is none of this was really front and center 5 years ago. And we kind of got to accept the data model itself is the long pole in the tent. Because once you have a baseline, then you can start making the logical decisions, just like Pravina was saying. Okay, we've got a certain amount of manufacturing capacity. What kind of renewable energy are we using in it? Oh, we've got options. Cool. That is going to start the gears turning on this. So when you get into this net zero space, have an awareness of that ISO standard. I see some, conversations I'm part of where people are a little bit grumpy about this and they're dismissive. And the reality is, I don't know anybody that doesn't want a cleaner environment. For all things that ESG is, it seems that people have narrowed into the E in it being emissions as being the one metric people can look at and compare company to company. And the interesting thing about this is, I personally think there's more important things under the ESG umbrella, but being pragmatic and knowing where the business community is, the focus on the emissions seems to be the consensus, and that CO2e, the equivalent, is going to be the part of this that I think from a supply chain standpoint, you want to raise the standard for your suppliers, that they give you verified data, and they can get to that point, maybe it's going to be through estimates, but put the burden on them, because your customers are going to be putting the burden on your companies to give verified product level carbon footprint calculations. And right now, that is a scramble. And because this is likely going to have a regulatory disclosure standpoint, it's going to have to pass what's called reasonable assurance, not limited assurance. And all of the sustainability reports right now use limited assurance, which is we didn't find anything negative, we didn't find anything wrong, which means they just look at the procedures, they don't do sampling and then actually verify the calculations. With a regulatory mandate, companies are going to be compelled to have a reasonable assurance, which means it's going to be equivalent to when an auditor comes in and reviews your procedures, your controls, takes a sample of the data and attests that you're following the accounting standards according to what the principles are. So if you think through how accounting has evolved from bookkeeping, and there were different, localities that use different ways of bookkeeping, you then had this evolution of a standard. We're on that journey around this thing called ESG and around emissions, that GHG protocol. It's a good starting point, but it's not a cut and paste. It is something that requires interpretation. We're telling our clients, you need to start now preparing for a carbon ledger, carbon controller, having the verification step be of the same quality as your financials. And it all traces it back to the unit of measure. And that's where the daisy chain of supplier to customer is going to be the part of this that we all have to lean into.
Reed, that's a lot to drink in. The standards that people are going to use across firms, across geos, across governments, defining those and agreeing on what it means to say something, let's say ESG compliant, let's just use that as a general term. That sounds like it's going to be a tough one for us to solve. Like what defines green, let's say. And so can you just comment a little bit more on who's defining those standards? How are we coming to agreement on what that means, especially when you think about geopolitics, when there's a lot at stake around what's green and what's not, China, the US, the EU.
It's similar to accounting, and a lot of people, I think, have trust in what companies publish from a financial standpoint because there's this rigor, but there's truly not a cut and paste accounting standard that every company in the world applies. There's IFRS, there's FASB, there's GAAP. What it is a set of guidance that you have to then determine what is your revenue recognition, your transfer pricing, your chart of accounts. And then an auditor who knows the standards looks at it and then says, you're following the standards according to the intention of that. But if you truly looked into the 10Ks and proxies, there are technical accounting decisions a company makes that is different from company to company in the same peer group. So when you ask the question of what is going to be the standard, what I can say from a direction of travel, regulators aren't going to give the answer because they're kind of in the same spot with all of us. This is new days. Investors aren't going to give you that. It's going to be the burdens on the company to properly define, document, and disclose what are your procedures. And there's a certain confidence that starts to build if you see those checks and balances, you see that rigor, you see the technical accounting, but it's going to be environmental science blended with accounting. And that's why from a regulatory standpoint, we looked at the SEC's most recent commentary on climate disclosures, and they sent out 20 sort of example letters they would send to companies. It was not, you didn't do X, Y, Z, it was, we would like more information about the source of this metric. And we're going to be in this back and forth, but I do not believe there will be a standard that's provided. It's going to be there's guidance, and then companies have to set their standard, and then the investors and the regulators will start to say good enough or no, and there'll be that evolution.
Okay, thank you so much, Reed. Tom, how do firms address the conflict between profits and ESG across shareholders, government, customers, and the public?
Sure, thank you. And this will be very, I think, complimentary to what Reed had just said, because I think what we're seeing, and we work a lot of private companies, I think it's different at the SEC registrant level, is a framework of define, measure, and value. So define, again, very complementary, to what we just heard, that you don't have universally accepted standards as yet, although I would argue there are some that are emerging. We're familiar with SASB, for example, which was called SASB to sound like FASB, with a lot of numerical based concepts around it, the task force on financial disclosure. So it's not as though there are 20, 30, 40 different ones. There are some that are emerging, World Economic Forum, where the concept of define has to come first. You have to define very clearly what you think ESG means. And working in the energy space, E is obviously very big because of not just CO2, but methane on it. So the energy complex has bigger bang for the buck because of the E piece, but S and G can't be ignored either. Define, measure, value. Measure, as just indicating, it's perhaps early days, or maybe a little bit past the first quarter on measurement, because we do live in the era of analytics and big data. So our approach has always been, let's not assume things can't be counted in the 21st century. Let's assume with machine learning and AI and digitization that a lot of things can be counted if you put the effort into it. So if you have a definition that you're working with, then we'll see how that plays out with the SEC in the United States. And then that effort put in to try to measure metrics that are defined, that fit within an ESG construct. The third part is the fun part, because it's around value. I think there's a lot of negativity in the market that ESG is it's a cost, and it's greenwashing, it's vague, and doesn't what does it really mean? Some of the early work we've done, again, we've only really been at this for a couple of years. I've seen positive valuation impacts within certain constrained and clearly defined situations because of de-risking. In other words, if you think of it this way, a discounted cash flow model, if I lower the discount rate, the valuation goes up. We believe that what we're seeing in a $200 billion green bond market, adjusting things in the capital asset pricing model like beta and alpha, there are ways that the WACC, the weighted average cost of capital, can decline for businesses if there is defined and measured ESG programs. And if you hold everything constant, and I take 15 basis points off of your WACC, the valuation goes up. Now again, early days, we're trying not to overpromise and underdeliver, but it is, we just push back on the notion that it is, especially with public companies saying, well, we have to do this, we're being forced to do it, but there's, the valuation impact is negligible or negative. We're just not convinced of that. We think that there's positive value, particularly in the energy complex, because of what's happening worldwide and general de-risking concepts.
Yeah, that's interesting. If everybody faced the same constraints in terms of ESG, then compliance with that would accrue to that risk or de-risking, like you said, and then people would be on the same page in terms of being valued relative to each other. Like when you take the leap and you're the first or a first mover in an industry and you're the only one doing it, I think that's where it becomes challenging, because you take the cost hit, you don't necessarily get the value yet. You can say all the things you want, maybe that accrues in other areas. That'll be interesting to see how that continues to evolve. Thanks, Tom. Jennifer, how important to your firm are customer expectations in ESG strategy?
Sure. So for those that are unaware or have not heard US Well Services, we are a hydraulic fracturing company that is a pioneer in the electric space. So with our electric frac technology, we are replacing traditional diesel engines that are running off of diesel, and then we have components now that are running off of our customers' fuel gas or CNG. We're truly one of the pioneers in this space since 2014. However, tying it back to your question on customer expectations, now more than ever, the oil and gas industry is facing increased scrutiny from investors, from federal, local, and state governments. And for our customers, that means they can no longer focus solely on improving operational efficiencies and reducing costs. There's now the component of reducing their greenhouse gas footprint, and what are they doing to make sure that they're protecting the environment. And so that's critical to our business because it's very much aligned with what we've been doing and it's moving in that direction. So our electric frac technology then offers a product that reduces greenhouse gases, it reduces noise pollution, it reduces the number of trucks that are on the road making deliveries of fuel. And then further to that, it also offers our customers reduced fuel costs because they're no longer, running diesel equipment. They can utilize their own field gases. So it's incredibly important to us all throughout our business. And then to further that, for the supply chain side of it, we're looking into new technologies that are on the market that are aligned with our vision on ESG. We're looking into products that we feel are responsible and sustainable, specifically within the chemical space. We're really starting to look into this and looking into different chemical packages that are aligning with our customers' expectations to move towards using recycled water and things like that. So we're very excited as the industry continues to move in this direction because it is very well aligned with U.S. Well Services and our overall strategy.
Yeah, it sounds like, I think the question's it's sort of two-sided. One would be for a company like David's. Their customers might expect NOV to have a strategy for ESG.
Right.
Your company helps ESG have a strategy. Helps NOV have a strategy for ESG by providing services and things that help it. But you also may have a need to demonstrate to your customers that you have an ESG strategy for your supply chain as well. So in terms of are you being green as well? I think that's something that you have to think about, or at least most of us have to think about in terms of our own strategy. But you're in a nice place because you get to play into the need for ESG by providing equipment and services that help companies get there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Matt, how's your firm targeting net zero and or supporting firms in their goals to drive to net zero?
Well, at Maze Environmental, we're big fans of private sector innovation. Maze Environmental, while we've been around for about 12 months, we're actually part of a family of companies that goes back about 25 years in the oil patch. So we've got a history of everything from oil field equipment, fabrication, full above ground production facility design and builds, as well as a range of field services work. So we've been active in the Permian and the Delaware for a long time. And what our ownership has seen is that all this equipment looks the same, but they don't operate it the same way. And so we're trying to bring some innovative solutions to help do that. So what Maze is an innovative stabilizer technology that the real benefit is obviously we eliminate methane emissions within hours of turning on the equipment. The real benefit is we swell the oil. So that gets the attention of the guys in the Permian, the operators, that if we can swell their oil anywhere from 4 to 7%, that's what they're after, especially the privately held companies that are private equity backed. I mean, yeah, you can talk about emissions reductions and so forth, but they're really about how do we get more oil out of the ground and get it into the market. So we certainly do see a lot of, as with the state mandates, both with our New Mexico operators, the state of Colorado. You can say what you want about pending federal mandates. What we're trying to do is just work collaboratively with our clients because we do bring a vertically integrated solution to market. Again, everything from fabrication, facility engineering and design to field services work. So we've been at about 12 months. We've got a number of good key clients in the Permian. And again, part of our challenge as well is giving them data as part of our remote capability to do remote monitoring. We can provide all that data back to our clients so they can then satisfy some of their ESG reporting that we've talked about already as well.
Okay, great. So, for all of you in the audience who are curious about how to solve for challenges, if you're in oil and gas, then it sounds like we got a couple of great opportunities and solutions up here for folks to talk about after the panel. So thanks for that, Matt. Renee, how are you including at Helmer? How are you including third parties in your ESG tech and solution offerings? The ecosystem out there and your partners.
Right. So we are using a lot of third parties, and the way we're doing that is at Helmer Ops is the mother company, and we are vetting out the companies that match our environmental outlooks and match our moral outlooks of how we want to improve the oil and gas industry. And we have been on the drilling side, and we still are on the drilling side. However, we see the biggest changes coming from the wellhead into the energy. Our products currently can take that flare gas, that waste gas, and convert it into electricity that has 3 end uses. The first end user is that energy, that electricity can be used right there on the rig location or the plant location. Or we have already established a relationship with Encore to where it can be sold back to the grid. Or we also have Bitcoin mining companies ready to buy that energy so that they can use it for the energy they need for their computer systems.
Okay, well, thanks for that. So opportunities to take advantage of your byproducts and that gas and turn it into something useful and help that challenge we got with the crypto mining companies burning so much electricity.
Right. And I mean, but selling it back to the grid is I think is very important, and getting all of these hydrocarbons, converting them to electricity, bringing them back to the grid is important because you are seeing that our energy is changing, right? And people want those electric cars and they want all of these, to decrease hydrocarbons. Your consumers, your common people, so to speak, is wanting to use it this way because there are some misunderstandings out there. So I'm concerned that we're putting the cart before the horse. We need to increase our electricity so that we can provide the energy needed for these electric appliances and cars and these big outputs they want to use, so that we do not have another catastrophe like we had in February of last year, where they had to start doing these rolling blackouts, and people in our families in America are all, and in Texas, are all huddling behind a fire to try to stay warm at night. That's not America. We don't need to be there again.
Well, thank you for that, Renee. Let's keep going. Then we can get some good Q&A here after the next question or two. So David, yours is a bit more philosophical perhaps, and I'm curious to hear from you about how we as individuals in a company can influence ESG, and what's the role of the individual versus, say, the job of the company?
It's a good question. I think it is very personal. I think sometimes we get into corporate thinking and what is our company doing or how are we talking, but we've seen a lot of change inside of NOV, but through individuals, and that's kind of what's driving it. Lots of people want to do things about ESG, and so for a number of years, we've kind of had a three-part approach that we've kind of developed, but through bringing our people together and everyone starting to get involved. And so we kind of look at taking what we already have and rejuvenating it, so bringing life into existing product and getting better at the carbon footprint in all of our existing places that we work. So similarly, we do EFRAC, we also have power generation and capturing systems off of any hoist or brake system. We have power management systems, all those things are growing. We had a nice kick into the system recently where we tried using hydrogen inside of our diesel generators, got about 30% reduction in our footprint. Those are just things where it's just people choosing and having the freedom to try and do stuff. So that's kind of been the rejuvenate. We also have kind of repurposing, taking things we already do. So we're working in carbon capture, we're working in hydrogen production, but that's really just our gas business starting to move over and learn how to process in those spaces. So that's been good. We've moved into geothermal in a really big way because there's potential there. We're improving existing geothermal systems where they can actually drill faster, work better, work in temperatures. There's a lot of that work going on. We've also got R&D in that space where geothermal can be a really great solution for energy production. And also in repurposing, we've taken jackups. We do about 75% of the world's wind installation systems, which are jackups that came out of drilling. And now we have a floating design for wind that we're looking at about 200 of those west of Shetland that will produce power for the platforms in the UK and also produce hydrogen off of the excess power. So that's kind of in that space. Then we took everyone into a room a few years back and started looking at what else can we invent. And so we're playing in solar in that space. We're playing in a lot of wind installation on land came out of that. So there's a lot of, we actually have an R&D space where we took some of our brightest people, just gave them cash and said, cut the cost in half of any renewable. And so there's tons of technologies coming from that. And so in fact, as we were running up to, it's probably a 5-year run, but everyone was starting to complain that why don't we tell the world what we're doing? And the truth is, everyone was telling the world what they were not doing and what they were thinking about doing, and they were selling press releases, and they were watching it going, we'll talk when we're making money. So we're getting great actual financial support from the ESG world where they're saying, you're actually making money. That's not just doing R&D or pretending what you're doing is, is just being more green. So it's been quite effective, but it really is empowering people. I don't think it's corporate statements. And I think most of our people want to do this. It's natural to us. So that's really where it gets personal. That's been my view.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we talk a lot about in transformation, the empowerment of individuals, empowerment of squads, autonomy, responsibility being important to the success there, putting the decision-making closer to the nexus of where something's happening. How do you at NOV deliver that message to the employees of the company? What gives someone the freedom to say, try a hydrogen experiment in a generator or in a plant that, could cost a lot of money ultimately and not work?
We generally don't message to the employees. We like to think of them as human beings. Whereas it's a much more natural thing for people to know. So we do talk about what we're doing inside. We give information. We do a lot of kind of live casts and things where we just bring people on, but we don't ever say this is the message. We don't teach people to speak words that are natural to them. So they get to see it, and we tell stories internally. So I do a show called The Engine Room where we bring in people, we talk about things they're doing, and that's how people learn. And so it's a lot more natural than sending a message to people, whereas people get to hear stories of how people have done things. And we try and do it that way. It's a bit more, we're not big fans of corporate, even though we're a big corporation. It's not a human trait, corporate. There's not corporate babies. It's not a human thing. It's an anti-human thing. So we try to make it as natural as possible.
Well, thank you for that. So maybe a more organic and cultural approach as opposed to something that's directive. Okay, well, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing. And I think that ties nicely into the next question for William, which ties back to the last question we had on the previous panel, which is around, I think, the war for talent. And I think the war for talent is, it's hurting all of us who need people to be successful. At IBM in our consulting business, we're struggling. I'm sure at PwC, there's a struggle for talent, and we're all fighting for the same capable minds and hearts. So, William, how important is having an ESG or net zero strategy in making your company an attractive place for young talent to work?
Well, I'll answer the question and I'll pivot a little bit and explain what we do. We're largely an asset-based transportation business, so easily the most important component of our labor pool is comprised of truck drivers. And people do not want to drive trucks and be gone away from their homes on a nightly basis. We easily compensate our associates. Our business is a portfolio business of the Freakin Group, and we're well above market when it comes to every metric you could measure as it relates to total compensation and reward, culture, truly valuing a human being for being a human being, so we really lean forward and lean into those relationships in a big way. And it is very difficult to attract people into our business right now, even with that package that we see. To pivot a little bit more to how it relates to our stewardship of the environment, we've reformulated our entire CapEx plan over the last few years and changed our CapEx strategy. The hold period on our assets is greatly reduced. We've cut it in half. Our fuel efficiency is up around 25% or so as a result of doing that. We're burning cleaner, burning less. So we're making investments into that space. Being a finished vehicle transportation business, though, if we want to haul cars with batteries in them, they weigh a lot more. And our box is really fixed. We're 13 feet, 6 inches tall. We're 80 feet long with 10 foot of overhang. So that's it. That's the size of the box right now. And our industry is largely, all of the efficiencies in it are based upon the efficiencies of the equipment. Very few of the decisions or infrastructure investments that are made in the finished vehicle space are made around human efficiencies. And as we're facing, we've termed it the Great Resignation, just this entire tightening of the labor force in the supply chain, that makes it really difficult to, when you're dealing with a space where someone's home time or someone's engagement level with their family or with their peers really takes second fiddle to how the industry's been capitalized for the last 100 years. So as we go forward, not only our business, but our industry will really have to, it will require a recapitalization of how we approach the market. And in so many different ways, the design of our equipment, whether or not buffer zones are created in the supply chain to relieve space constraints at facilities. And that's largely, we do a really good job of delivering products on time and meeting on-time delivery standards and exceptional quality standards. When we see these bubbles come through the supply chain, though, you're not getting a phone call because your on-time delivery dipped 4%. You're getting a phone call because, hey, this yard or this facility, this plant's at capacity, the holding yard is, and we need space. So we see infrastructure challenges where we need really more real estate if we're going to create those buffer zones, or a redesign of the equipment. It'll be probably both if we're going to provide associates a higher quality of life and really be able to do those things and compete in the future. So, and two, my background is really, I started kind of working in a turnaround type capacity when I was a young kid right out of school. And so I learned what free cash flow means really quick. And then was a partner in a business after that. And so was keenly aware of who my silent partners were and from a tax basis. And we're not a publicly traded company. So we really, our load factor, if we were to say, hey, we're going to move all electric cars today, and we're going to do that with an electric truck or hydrogen truck or something like that, I mean, we're looking at easily 50-60% increases in the cost basis to do that, just based on load factor degradation and equipment redesign. And unless there are regulatory changes in legislation, tolerances are extended to allow us to be more competitive and pass those efficiencies on in the marketplace.
Yeah, so it sounds like you need some market and regulatory help to change the foundation of the capitalization of your business, which would potentially allow you to use, environmental stewardship as a way to attract talent. Do any of you on the panel have a perspective for your business on how important it is to find people to have a position on where you stand environmentally? David, would you like to comment?
I think what we're seeing, okay, maybe I'll just talk about it.
I'll bring this over to you.
Your battery's out. I think it's actually critical.
It's next to the other microphone.
Like we got it on, just.
I can stand, I guess. I think it's critical for the next generation, actually, the people who are coming through right now, kind of mid-career and below, it's the most important thing is that you're actually doing something to make a difference. And that's on the E, the S, and the G side, is that who you are, everything you're doing, it all seems to matter and be very, very important. And that's why a lot of people are leaving. They want to feel a part of the purpose of what you're doing. And so improving this world, when people say, boy, this is a tough cost burden, or this is a pain for us to do, the message is always a bad idea, because as long as we're impacting the environment, the planet, making it a better place, people care a lot about that. And that's going to factor into how the market rewards us. It's going to factor into everything we do. So we need to kind of end that language and get into that this is just where we're going.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, David. It's great to hear that the senior leadership of these companies in the Houston area are really concerned about that. Pravina, I'd love to hear how it is at Shell right now in terms of attracting talent. How important is the environmental position of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a monumental piece that we're currently considering, right? So I think we're seeing a lot of the oil and gas companies rebrand themselves more as energy providers, because ultimately that's the direction we're heading towards. And for us with environment, we recently shared out with all of our shareholders earlier this year on what we're doing within sustainability, not just to reduce our emissions, but also how are we going to protect the environment and reduce waste. Because, ultimately what we're still seeing is consumer outlook or mindset of what they think of when they think of energy companies, right? They see plastic bottles in the ocean, they see devastating photos of wildlife being impacted, and it's all around us. It's, thinking about what we're producing for the world to live more cleaner and more efficiently, but also how are we, taking care of the products at the end of life and what happens to them afterwards. So I think the responsibility is shifting towards really owning our products and understanding what happens and educating consumers and having a more direct impact on that is absolutely critical to us progressing.
Thank you so much. Tim, I'm not sure if we have time for any questions from the audience and take your guidance on that. I'd like to give someone a chance to ask if we have a moment.
One final question.
Yeah? Anybody in the audience got a burning question for one of our panelists? Yep.
Jennifer? Wondering if there could be some synergy between you and Helmer Ops as far as generating electrical from the flare gas to help power your equipment?
Absolutely, I think there could be synergies. I think there will be a conversation after this panel, actually. But definitely, I think there's a lot of different technologies that are realizing that this is the way that the industry is heading. And I think, we're excited to see additional technologies that streamline into the services that we're providing. So we'll definitely have a follow-up conversation after this.
Well, great. I think if we could all just give a hand to our panel. Thank you so much for the great conversation. There'll be plenty of time to connect after the breaks and whatnot. So thank you all for your participation very much. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. All right, we are acknowledging our speakers once again. Reed Morrison, Net Zero Energy Leader of the Year. Congratulations. William Nolan, Clean Energy Trucking Executive of the Year. Make those turns happen faster. Renee Helmer, what a great friend. Oilfield Products and Services Executive of the Year. Thank you, Renee. And I'll switch gears. Jennifer, Clean Energy Upstream Executive of the Year. Congratulations. Okay, a guy after my own heart. Tom Mcnulty, ESG Mergers and Acquisitions Leader of the Year. This is a big heart one. Mr. Reed, Global Clean Energy CTO of the Year. Pravina, I can't fit it through, but I'll try. Global Sustainability Leader of the Year. And the best for last, Matt Flanagan, the leader, the Global Clean Emissions Innovator of the Year, taking major market share. Congratulations, Matt. Thank you. And Brian. Don't forget Brian. We'll meet you at the COVID Center. I'm just going to tell you, that is the sharpest sports jacket I've seen all day. It's incredible. Thanks, Brian. You are Sustainable Executive of the Year. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.